Okay, so today we're kind of doing things a little differently. We're cracking open a topic most people don't think about when they're sipping on their favorite drink.
Yeah, it's not the most glamorous side of the beverage industry, but it's a really important one.
It really is. And, that's why we're doing this whole deep dive thing, right?
Yeah,
To get below the surface.
absolutely.
So we're talking beverage waste, basically all the stuff that doesn't end up in your actual drink.
Exactly. And we're really lucky to have some insights from GreenFlow Environmental Solutions for this one. They're like the go-to experts for helping beverage companies manage all that leftover stuff responsibly.
Yeah, Green Flow, they're doing some really interesting things.
Yeah.
And one thing that jumped out was this idea of a waste challenge. What exactly is that? What are we talking about here?
Well, imagine this. You crack open a can of soda, right? Pretty straightforward. But behind that one there's a whole lot of stuff that didn't make it into your glass.
Like what kind of stuff?
We're talking liquid waste, leftover ingredients, packaging byproducts, oils, the list goes on and on. And it's not just about what it is, but also the sheer volume of it all.
I can imagine. So it's not as simple as just tossing everything in the recycling bin and calling it a day.
Not even close. Each type of waste needs its own approach, its own solution, and that's where the real challenge comes in.
Makes sense. So how does GreenFlow actually tackle this? How do they even begin to address a problem of that scale?
Well, they start by really digging deep. They actually go on site to a company and analyze exactly what's being generated and in what quantities, kind of like waste detectives.
Waste detectives. I like that. So they're getting their hands dirty, literally, to figure out the scope of the problem.
Exactly. And that's actually what sets them apart. They don't believe in a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, I read about that. They create these custom waste management plans, right?
Exactly. They understand that what works for a giant soda company might not work for a small craft brewery, for example. They take everything into account, the type of waste, the volume, a company's sustainability goals, even their budget.
So it's all very tailored, very specific to each company's needs and situation.
Absolutely. It's about finding the most effective and sustainable solutions for each individual case.
Okay, so they've done the investigation. They've created a custom plan. What's next? What does this sustainable processing actually look like in action?
That's where it gets really interesting because they've got a whole arsenal of methods up their sleeves.
Like, give me an example.
Let's say you have a brewery. They often end up with a lot of spent grains right left over from the brewing process.
Right, makes sense.
So instead of just tossing that green flow, might employ a process called anaerobic digestion.
Anaerobic what now?
Anaerobic digestion, basically it uses microorganisms to break down the organic matter in a sealed environment without oxygen.
Sounds kind of complicated.
It is pretty complex, but the results are impressive. This process not only drastically reduces the amount of waste going to landfills, but it also produces biogas as a byproduct.
Biogas, isn't that like a renewable energy source?
You got it. And that biogas can then be captured and used by the company to power their facilities. It's like closing the loop, turning waste into a valuable resource.
Okay, now that's really cool, turning trash into treasure. That's amazing.
It is, and it highlights a really crucial aspect of GreenFlow's approach. They're not just about disposal, they're all about finding innovative ways to reuse and repurpose waste materials whenever possible.
So it's a more holistic, sustainable approach. It's not just about minimizing the negative impact, but also maximizing the positive potential.
Precisely. It's about looking at waste through a different lens, seeing it as an opportunity rather than just a problem.
I like that perspective. So they're helping companies reduce their environmental impact, find cost-effective solutions, and even enhance their public image by being more sustainable. Talk about a win-win-win.
Exactly. It's a smarter way of doing business, one that benefits everyone involved, including the planet.
Absolutely. And speaking of transparency, GreenFlow also places a lot of emphasis on something called compliance reporting. What's that all about?
Right. Well, you see, the beverage industry has to comply with some pretty strict environmental regulations, and rightly so. And GreenFlow makes sure their clients can prove they're meeting those standards.
So it's about accountability, making sure companies are walking the walk when it comes to sustainability.
Exactly. They provide detailed documentation showing exactly how the waste is being managed and that everything's above board. It's about transparency for both the companies and the consumers who are becoming increasingly interested in these issues.
It's like you said earlier, people are starting to care more about where their products come from and what happens after they're done with them.
Absolutely. Consumers want to know that the companies they support are operating responsibly and ethically, and GreenFlow helps provide that assurance.
So GreenFlow is tackling the environmental impact, ensuring regulatory compliance, and boosting company image, all at the same time. Talk about a triple threat.
But hold on, they don't stop there, do they? This is where things get really interesting because they've also partnered with this awesome organization, One Tree Planted Right.
You got it.
I love what they're doing. They plant a tree for every single service GreenFlow provides. It's like a little thank you gift to the planet.
I know it's such a cool initiative. It's a really tangible way to offset their environmental impact and contribute to reforestation efforts around the world.
Yeah, you can really see the impact there.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, do you think this is something we'll see more of as consumers become more aware of these issues?
Definitely. Sustainability is no longer a niche concern. It's becoming mainstream.
Right.
Especially younger generations, they really care about a company's environmental and social track record. Totally. It's like that saying, vote with your dollar.
Exactly. Consumers are starting to demand more transparency and action from the companies they support, and businesses are taking notice because ultimately it affects their bottom line.
Right. It's not just good ethics. It's good business. So we've talked about GreenFlow's approach, but are there any other interesting innovations happening in this space when it comes to beverage waste?
Oh, tons. One area that's really exciting is the development of biodegradable packaging.
Whoa, biodegradable, like it just disappears.
Well, not exactly, but it breaks down naturally without leaving harmful microplastics behind.
Okay, that's still pretty amazing. How does that even work? What are they made of?
They're using some really innovative materials like mushroom roots, seaweed extracts, even agricultural waste.
That's wild. So instead of petroleum-based plastics that stick around forever, we could have packaging that actually nourishes the earth.
Exactly. It's a complete game changer, and it shows how much potential there is for innovation in this industry.
It's pretty inspiring, actually. So what of the waste itself? Are there any cool new ways to utilize the byproducts beyond what GreenFlow is doing?
Oh yeah, there's some fascinating research happening in that area. For example, did you know that spent coffee grounds can be used to create bioplastics?
No way. Seriously.
Yeah, and textiles, building materials even. It's incredible what they can do with something most people just throw away.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What about all those leftover grains from brewing beer? What happens to those?
Well, some companies are actually experimenting with using brewery wastewater to grow edible mushrooms. Wait, you're kidding. That's insane. So we could be munching on beer mushrooms soon.
Maybe. It's still in the experimental phase, but it just goes to show that what we consider waste can often be a valuable resource.
It's like that whole idea of a circular economy, right?
Exactly. Instead of a linear system of take, make, dispose, we're looking at ways to close the loop and create a more sustainable cycle.
Where waste is designed out and resources are constantly being reused and repurposed. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about the possibilities.
It really is, and this shift toward a circular economy is essential if we want to create a more sustainable future for the beverage industry and beyond.
Okay, so we've talked about innovative solutions, but what about the here and now? What can we as consumers do to make a difference today?
That's the big question, right? And sometimes it feels like all we hear is reduce, reuse, recycle. It can be overwhelming. Yeah, it can be a lot to process sometimes. So where do we even start? Like, what's one simple thing we can all do right now?
Honestly, I think it starts with awareness. Just taking a moment to think before you buy.
Okay, so like putting down that six-pack and really looking at it.
Exactly. What does the label say? Are there any certifications? Do they mention anything about sustainable sourcing or packaging?
You're right. I usually just grab my usual without even thinking about it.
And it's not about being perfect or knowing everything. It's about taking those small steps to become more conscious consumers.
Makes sense. So paying attention to labels, that's a good starting point. What else?
You know, a lot of companies now publish sustainability reports online.
They do. I had no idea.
Yeah, they outline their environmental commitments and track their progress. It's worth checking those out if you're curious about a particular brand.
So basically doing a little research before you buy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power, right? The more we know about where our beverages come from and how they're made, the better choices we can make.
It's about aligning our values with our purchasing decisions.
Precisely. Because ultimately, our choices have an impact. And when enough people start demanding more sustainable practices, companies listen.
That's what it's all about, right? Collective action driving real change.
Exactly. It's not just about feeling good about our own choices. It's about creating a ripple effect that transforms the entire industry.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you know what? This whole conversation has really opened my eyes. I'm definitely going to look at my next can of sparkling water a little differently.
Me too. It's amazing what we can learn when we start asking questions and digging deeper.
Exactly. Cheers to that. And a huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into the world of beverage waste.
We hope you learned something new today and feel inspired to make even small changes in your own life.
Remember, every sip counts. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.